Welcome, everyone, to the episode 13 of the Office Hours podcast, the spooky edition, number 13. Sadly, it's not Friday and it's not Halloween, otherwise it would have been even cooler, but hey, we'll work with that. Today we have with us Mo, as usual. Mo's got some things that we're going to discuss today. It's going to be super interesting, super exciting. Don't forget to join the Discord and Telegram. The QR code will be floating somewhere in the vicinity. And let's take it away, Mo.
Thank you. How you doing, Vasili?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit more tired than usual. I've been working on a whole bunch of different things. So my days are very full, and by the end of it, I'm just dead pretty much every time. But hey, the grind gets us all, and we got to stick to it.
Hang in there, hang in there.
Yeah. How about you?
So, I'm doing good. Actually, I've been up to a lot of things as well recently, and it's all going well. So I'm excited. Um, I'm looking forward to the ending of the week. I've got news, but we'll see.
Oh, interesting.
We'll see. Um, Today, what I wanted to, I think it was sometimes last week when I sent you a message about Lodash.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to talk to you about bankruptcy in
Right.
open source
Yeah.
community, like in
Yeah.
open source project.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you know about bankruptcy in open source project?
Oh man, sure. I think well, I have to qualify because I did a little bit of reading about Lodash, and I think it's not exactly how it appears to be. It seems like they're doing like a full rewrite internally, so a lot of those issues wouldn't necessarily make sense for the new code base. So they're just closing everything out because they're gonna say we're gonna have like 100% rewritten completely from scratch, brand new version. Most of those bugs probably don't apply, so get rid of them all and let the new things start trickling in. So it's not like Lodash is going away. It's just that they're doing this other thing. So maybe it was communicated poorly and then somebody kind of sensationalized it and ran with it. I haven't really paid too much attention. I use Lodash fairly sparingly these days. I mean, it used to be pretty great equalizer back in the day after underscore, because underscore was written as this sort of kind of like complement to jQuery. jQuery was like a great equalizer for different browser APIs, and underscore was this great utility belt, but it was a little bit bloated. So Lodash tried to redo it in a less bloated fashion that's like more compatible with like modern bundlers and things like that. So they're doing a new thing. They probably are still alive, but in terms of software bankruptcy, that's an interesting term. I don't think I heard it put it like that before, but it does make sense. Uh, I think I mentioned in our previous conversations, there's like a lot of drama in the world of open source, you know, and there's a lot of undercurrents and there's a lot of sort of factions vying for power in various popular projects and repositories, and different people have their ideas on how things should be done, and there's like conflict, and sometimes people flip the table, fork the project. Sometimes projects decide to go commercial and start applying like very restrictive licenses. Like, I don't know if you heard about what's happening with Unity right now. They're not entirely open source, but they made a big poo-poo lately with some of their announcements, lost a lot of public goodwill, like a massive amount. It was just staggering. People basically are saying, well, there's no trusting Unity anymore. I'm never going to be using it for any of my future projects ever again, type thing. Some of them are probably going to be back, but a lot of the damage was done by a small statement saying that they're like changing their pricing structure. So that was a bold strategy. So we'll see how it plays out for them.
Yeah, I think the issue with Lodash is issue bankruptcy, uh, which basically means like they are putting everything away to start afresh. But um, for sometimes I wonder, like, what could be like, aside from the fact that you want like a new solutions to some of the problems, are they going to be building like a new library entirely, or it's just going to be like we will look into all these issues internally and then
Hmm.
fix it?
You know, I don't specifically know about Lodash. I think they would probably want to maintain compatibility on the API level, so the new version is mostly drop-in. That doesn't always work out. Like, for instance, the switch between AngularJS and Angular version 2 back in those days,
Mhm.
they're both called Angular. They both kind of have this idea about reactive web applications, but they are completely different. Like there's no clear path from one to another. It's just complete rewrite of everything that's using it. So these things happen too. And it's kind of an equivalent of a bankruptcy in a sort in a sense. I think when it comes to issues, yeah, I think that can happen too, because it can be very overwhelming. There is a new repo, somebody puts up something, and then all of a sudden, you know, 1,500 issues in a span of a couple of months for like one or two developers. You know, it's like imagine your backlog with 1,500 issues and more coming in, and you maybe had some sort of a vision and a roadmap for your project, and now all of that gets derailed completely by all of these issues. And the problem with it too is that um, it's not that you have 1,500 issues, is that you have to go into every single one of them, go through it, figure out if this applies. So you have to do a lot of triaging to figure out what issues are issues and what issues are as designed. So there's like a lot of effort just going through all of that backlog while you're not doing anything else. So that can like completely paralyze the team working on it. And at the same time, if you're ignoring, you're going to be ignoring like 99% of them, right? Because you don't have enough manpower to actually actively deal with that stuff. And I think we briefly touched on it in one of our earlier episodes when we were talking about open source, is that a lot of people feel very entitled about open source. And when they have an issue and nobody pays attention to that issue, they start raising stink on social media. It's like, oh, maintainers, they're shitty people. They're not paying attention to my issue. I need it fixed, blah, 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 blah. And that can get very demoralizing too. I think we talked about it as well, is that some maintainers, they become so demoralized by this constant onslaught of very rude, mean, demanding people that they basically say, flip the table, get out of here. You know, you guys can sort it out on your own. So I think it's way more common. Um, I think bigger projects that fall under sponsorship of some big organization like Facebook or Google may do better because they have resources to dedicate to these things. But for a smaller project, there's countless tales of people just burning out of the entire ecosystem for these reasons.
Given the history like of Lodash in the JavaScript ecosystem, I think it's a pretty important library for any JavaScript ecosystem. Um, how do you think this type of bankruptcy affects the ecosystem?
Well, I mean, it's not unheard of to be using a library that hasn't been updated in a while. There are some libraries that can't really be updated any further. They reached some sort of homeostatic point where you shouldn't really be adding anything to it, and there's not really that much left to fix. But for a lot of people, I think the heuristic of picking a library is they would look when the library was last updated. Because if it's 10 years old, Like last release on NPM happened 5 years ago. Well, okay, so they're clearly not supporting all of the new features of Node. They're like probably not doing modules. It's going to play poorly with tree shaking. They're likely not exposing typings for TypeScript and all of these things. So some people might kind of just not use those libraries, myself among them. Sorry, my nose got really itchy and it's really annoying. But if you're already using it, you will not get any updates, but you can still use it, right? You can keep using it, and it's unfortunate. And if you think that the project will have no future, or maybe their future is not compatible with what you're doing, you just have to start looking for a replacement. And I think like the idea of Lodash, same as the idea of jQuery, was these helper methods for things that should be in the language but aren't. And some of those things are in the language, and some of those things are so trivial to implement yourself. Sometimes I see some projects where they import Lodash and reach for like one or two functions out of the entire library, and it's just like, well, why can't you just make a quick one yourself? You don't need to have like you know, the situation with node dependency hell, and how like the node module folder is the heaviest object in the universe. You know, the meme was like the gravitational pull of sun, and then the gravitational pull of black hole, and then it just like goes off screen. It's like the gravitational pull of node modules folder. It's like gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of worth of dependencies. I think that gotten a little bit silly and a little bit out of hand. I think that runtimes like Deno are in active opposition to that style, and maybe Bun. I don't know if you had a chance to look at Bun for node-based development, or not node-based because it's not Node, it's a different runtime, but it's like JavaScript, server-side JavaScript runtime. They try to put some batteries with the framework more so than Node has. But to be honest, when I looked at it the first time, they have this one namespace Bun with all of the different functions for like crypto and WebSockets and all these other things. So like, that kind of reminds me of PHP. They just have like a billion functions for everything. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. Where was I going with this? Yeah, you can still use the library and find ways to migrate away from it. And in case of Lodash, you probably don't need it. I think there was even a website. I don't know if it was about Lodash or underscore specifically, but it was, you will not need Lodash, and it just gives you like this short snippets of pure JavaScript implementation of most of the functionality. So,
Exactly.
you know, like a vanilla JS approach. It's tempting to reach out for a library for these things. On one hand, it kind of makes sense. Like if somebody already wrote it and it's there and it's good and it's tested and it has a following and bugs are fixed, why not use it? The other side of that spectrum is vendoring, where instead of depending on external package management system with like version tracking, you just get a version, you download its source code into your vendor folder, and you link against that and never touch the outside world again. So you don't receive any updates, you don't see any of that stuff. I think it's more common for video games and compiled code, because it's, as far as a vulnerability vector, it isn't really one, unless you're targeting like the system itself. But for PC games, like nobody's gonna hack you through PC games for most part. And you know, funnily enough, they bundle all that anti-cheat software that is worse than any hacker imaginable, because it just, you know, scans your entire system and exfiltrates a bunch of data from your computer, and you click I agree when you install it. So, you know, so yeah, there's package management or vendoring, and maybe you can sit somewhere in between.
Do you really think it's not possible these days to get hacked from PC games?
Um, no, I think it's possible. It's definitely possible. Like for instance, if you take Unity, for instance, they run on .NET Core, oh sorry, .NET Framework, And with .NET, there are plethora of ways of like instantiating classes that will allow you to run arbitrary code on the target platform. But that also implies that, it's an online game and, you can hack into the protocol to send the data. So I would say it would be very, very non-trivial, but as like an active vector to take over your computer, like if you download it from reputable source, like if it's not a pirated game that's been injected with all sorts of viruses, which is completely different scenario, which is also kind of funny because was it Ubisoft recently? They released like versions of their older games without the DRM protection, because usually DRM protection impairs performance of the game quite significantly. They're trying to obfuscate all of the code, or they like run it on some virtual machine within the game itself. And so the frames per second usually suffers. People did comparisons when they have like a pirated version of Assassin's Creed 4 or whatever, and then a retail version. And pirated version is like 120 FPS, and retail version is like 35 FPS with like all the stuttering because of the DRM protection. So they released a undrm'd version of their games on Steam, and people saw like a scene mark from Razer 1911 group that like it's like a scene group that releases pirated wares. So Ubisoft put pirated version of their game on Steam.
Who was that person? Who made that decision? Oh boy.
Yeah, good times.
Oh God. Like I feel there are some mistakes you make, like in this industry that I feel will probably haunt you for a long time. But sometimes I hear when people say like, oh, some professions you can't afford to make some mistakes. Maybe as a doctor, you can afford to make mistakes. I feel like mistakes are even bigger in our industry. Like this type of decision, the amount of people affected, the amount of lawsuits.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the fellow who left his computer bag on a train, and it had an unencrypted hard drive with a whole bunch of medical data from the provincial health authority. It's such a, it's not even intentional. It's just this minor screw up that affects countless numbers of people in like the most intimate ways. So software certainly has that opportunity. And remember some episodes back we talked about how poorly optimized code steals everybody's time because again of how many people are using the software. So the fact that so many people are using same software, it just all of the bad things are multiplied across so many people. So yeah.
Hopefully they find a resolution for that, a resolve for that. But anyway, I wanted to also to I had a follow-up question to what I asked earlier. Um, in like you mentioned, like subsequently in our previous episodes, we were talking about open source project, and I brought up an idea that I think um, if you start a project open source, it does not necessarily have to remain open source. And especially if you intend to keep the project long term. And when I was reading about Lodash, I was curious if it had gotten to a point where they decided to um I don't know if it's possible even because like if you really look at Lodash, I think it's mostly about array modifications and just few functions to modify the data in the arrays. Maybe that's just the basic side of it. Maybe there's other things, but that's that's the part that I use the most about Lodash. And I'm just curious, like then times when we're talking about this, I made a mention of something that I think open source um projects should have a way of um finding revenue to be able to keep the project running. Because at the end of the day, even the people who do the maintaining, maintenance, um, would be able to have more motivation to want to do it. But maybe then it doesn't make it open source anymore. Maybe the entire point of open source is to have like people do this type of things without requesting any form of compensation or something. I don't know. But I'm just curious, like, do you think this would have solved Lodash problem? Maybe.
Probably not. And I think we touched on it a little bit before as well. I think that the model under which the software is distributed and the model in which the software gets compensated for, like the efforts of writing that software gets compensated, they're orthogonal. You can have free closed source software, you can have paid open source software, and the possibilities, everything in between, right? Like one doesn't, like just the fact, I mean, okay, a lot of people equate open source to free as in beer, right? Uh, the Richard Stallman distinction between free as in speech versus free as in beer, right? So maybe you can have some free as in beer software, but it's not open source, like you can't contribute to it, you cannot see what's there. And if that works for you, fine. And he's been on this sort of, maybe I can call it a crusade even, but he's not very fond of people who equate open source and free software, because there's like his specific definition of what free software is, and it's mostly to do with like free as in free speech. But there's this expectation that if it's open source, I can use it for free. So I think we touched on it before. It's if you have to pay for it, it drastically reduces the amount of takers. And then you have to be a reputable vendor before people will be willing to give you money for it. And so even okay, like let's look at Unity. It's not open source, but it was a very affordable platform for people to build games with a commercial subscription where you pay monthly fees and you build using their platform and you release your games. And once you monetize your games, I don't know exactly the details of the contract, but I think if you monetize your games after a certain amount of revenue, you pay a percentage. And a lot of engines these days are structured in similar terms. The percentages may differ. I guess a lot of people say, oh, well, we picked Unity over Unreal Engine because Unreal Engine is like 5% fee, and that's a lot. Our margins are thin enough where 5% makes a big difference, and Unity structure was different, so we chose that one. And then Unity pulls the rug from underneath them with these new monetization agreements that are retroactive. And people who have been developing a game for the last 3 years feel completely betrayed because now they might actually lose money because of it. And so at the same time, there's open source engines like Godot, for instance, which is completely free and open source. You can use it, no royalties required. It has a smaller feature set. It can do less, but you're never at a risk of that situation happening, right? And so if you want to have commercial software, be it open source or what, doesn't matter. You have to offer something there, right? You have to offer something better. Like why people wouldn't just use Godot because it's completely free? Well, because Unity offers all of these other things. And you can't prognosticate the changes in licensing agreements. Even though, in all fairness, you kind of can. There's been so many cases recently where a company has a product that you buy a license and you have perpetual access to that software. For that version of that software, you have a perpetual access. You buy it once, it's yours. Like Photoshop version 6 for Windows 2000, or I don't know the versions, but anyway, a bunch of years back. You bought the license, you have the CD, you have the CD key on it, you can pop it in, install it, plug in the key, it works. That's it. Your transaction with that company is done. Then came the Creative Cloud, where you pay subscription every month, or Microsoft Office 365, right? You pay subscription fees every month to keep on using it. And so many companies have started retroactively changing licensing agreements for their products, where originally you would have been paying for a perpetual version. Like maybe you can pay $15 a month, or maybe you can pay 2,000 and get a perpetual version that you're supposed to get upgrades for free for the entire life, right? Because in the beginning, they're soliciting money up front, and you pay them a lot of money up front, and for that, they give you the privilege of just retaining your license forever. And then 5 years down the line, the product become really popular. A lot of people are using it. And some bright MBA graduate of Harvard Business School says, you know, all those people that paid once and they're not bringing us any money anymore. How about we start charging them? And then they retroactively change the license terms. And now your perpetual license is no longer perpetual and you have to pay again. There's been a lot of big scandals with like Autodesk, Wondershare, like Unity now, just the ones that are kind of in more prominence. But I'm pretty sure there's a whole bunch more that are doing this thing. So you can anticipate these things. Like the companies that are following the SaaS model, a lot of them are prone of saying, oh, that perpetual license that you have, well, nah, tough shit. We're not going to be doing that anymore. So should people invest into open source with fewer features and not have the risk? Or should they invest or focus their attention on SaaS software with the possibility of getting screwed in some distant future?
Okay. So this is my opinion, right? And the way I see, especially in the JavaScript ecosystem, we have NPM and we also have Yarn as managers.
Yeah.
These are platforms where we have like millions, like a lot of libraries across these two platforms. I'm using these two as just for my illustration. So for example, if I build a library to do certain things, or maybe for example like Lodash, something like Lodash, and I think the best way for developers to consume it would be through NPM and through Yarn. So now they become the content, container for the content. So it's like if you look around now in any other content creation or like whatever creation platforms, there is some incentive for you to keep doing what you're doing and to do it better. If you look in NPM, there's multiple libraries that probably do the same thing, but like one is just like slightly different from the other, or like maybe one was just like less maintained than the other, or somebody just so like it's just I just feel like if there is no form of motivation, we'll continue to have a lot of likely garbage in the entire like in the container, and we, we might see more and more of this because also I think somehow judging from the amount of like clicks downloads that happen on npm per day, I would imagine that that can be a source of revenue generation that can be distributed amongst people who actually contribute to the content of these package managers. And this is where I stand. So for example, if Lodash or like if any other library gets some form of I don't know how it is because I didn't put one there yet. I don't know how the business is exactly, but I would imagine if it's like this, there needs to be a form of it's not exactly because sometimes you use some, I don't know in JavaScript, but in like other platforms, you use some like libraries and then maybe somebody is asking you in the console like, oh, buy us a cup of coffee. That's just that's absurd, you know, like that right there is not a good look for the library or like there, but you can't really blame them because at the end of the day, there is a need for this resource to be able to continue with what they are doing. So I genuinely still think like um, package managers like NPM or like Yarn or whichever one we have left uh, should 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 be like a should have a form of revenue generation that can be shared amongst like these libraries to keep them active. Because it's a lot of work that they do, and as long as many people still use JavaScript, there'll probably still be many people who still want to use these libraries. But this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I would broadly say that I agree. I just don't necessarily see how it can be made possible because that situation is not new. Like NPM is not the first and it's not the last. And I mean, pretty much any major open source software have been in a situation. It's like, well, how do we make money? Because we need to stay afloat. We need to pay our maintainers. We need to pay our developers. I think the whole bit with the buy us a cup of coffee, I think the intent there is you pay $5 for Starbucks coffee every day, but you're not willing to pay $5 for the library that you use every day. So it's sort of a, and there's also this site coffee.com, like ko-fi, where you can do like these small donations. So it's like, you know, $5 a month for some library is not that big amount. And it is kind of like guilt tripping people into paying for it, right?
Exactly.
But okay, so the other thing too is, so there is library maintainers need to get paid, ideally, because I mean they do work, so they should get paid for that work. I mean we live in a capitalist society after all, but open source is very socialist in its underpinnings in terms of from everybody by their ability to everybody by their need. I don't personally believe in that slogan. It's very counterproductive in my view, but whatever. It's a conversation for another day. But okay, so library maintainers need to get paid. Package repositories also need to get paid because they do a lot of work. And okay, so you mentioned NPM and Yarn. There's also like PNPM and whatever, and Bun or what have you. It has its own package manager. I think one crucial difference is all of these package managers, they're all interfaces to npmjs.org. Like they don't maintain their own infrastructure. Like Yarn does not download packages from Yarn. It still downloads them from the NPM backend.
Absolutely.
So if
Yeah.
NPM goes down, all of them stop working. That's it.
Good.
And if you think about it, well, you need storage to store all of the packages and all of the versions and all of that stuff. You need a lot of bandwidth because a lot of people download those packages every day. Those things cost money. Then there's problems of mitigating security, like packages get hijacked and injected with malware. A lot of people get compromised through vendor supply chain attacks. Not good. You have to have like security staff to isolate critical packages and make sure that like everything's prim and proper. Nobody's trying to do anything weird in there. All of that requires money, and I think places like NPM, they monetize through selling private registries to corporate clients, where a corporation can have a private registry for packages that they're not willing to publish to public, but they still want to be able to use the NPM's infrastructure and interfaces and tooling to consume those packages internally. So that's how NPM makes some of its money. I don't know if NPM is profitable. I would suspect that it's not. And I think pretty much any package infrastructure out there, be it Node, be it PHP, Perl, Python, they all suffer from these problems, like Ruby, Rust, all of them, they all have the same challenges and they all need money. So they kind of have to come up with ways of monetizing. But coming back to that's a more solvable problems because they have these corporate avenues for monetization. But even then, it's kind of interesting because the specification is more or less the interface is public. There are other implementations that are compatible with NPM. Like you may run JFrog Artifactory on your system and you can use it as an NPM package source, package registry for your custom stuff. And they have like a self-hosted version or they have a commercial SaaS version. GitLab has its own built-in package manager. GitHub, I believe, has its own built-in package manager, so you can distribute artifacts through those systems, which means that that doesn't pay money to NPM, but they still maintain the rest of the packages that you consume in your project. So portion of that money goes to GitLab and GitHub and JFrog and all these other companies. Okay, so those guys at least make some money out of it, so they can make some living, maybe not living, but they have enough to keep the lights on, hopefully, because if they don't, I guess corporate sponsors will have to step in. So I imagine there's a lot of NPM packages being installed from Facebook's office. So I imagine that they have some sort of sponsorship deals with NPM, because if NPM goes down, half of Facebook's gets halted, not a good thing for all involved. Same thing for Google, Microsoft, on high level, they have to have agreements for that, which are commercial agreements. For the package developers, the options are fairly slim. There was this period in time where everybody was abusing console.log in install scripts to solicit donations or what have you. And I think NPM in the new versions of the client software basically made that impossible. I think they added this sponsorship thing where you can like link your GitHub sponsor or some other means where if you say NPM sponsors, it will give you like a detailed list of all the libraries that are soliciting sponsorship like that, but it's not going to be front and center. So for most people, they're not going to bother doing that. What I've seen for some of these packages is that usually there's going to be, well, first of all, most likely that package is going to tailor enterprise, or it's going to be focused on enterprise solutions. Like one of the very popular ones is grids, especially grids for React and Angular. They're really hard to do because for a lot of data, they need to be very performant. So for instance, like AG Grid, it's a JavaScript library for doing grids like Excel, pivot tables, like all of the fancy stuff. And they have a free offering that you can use. And then they have a superset that it's closed source that they sell a license for. So that's how they monetize it. But a lot of these packages kind of have to target enterprise clients because me as a person doing a personal project, I'm never going to bother with that. Like, I'm likely not going to need that type of functionality in the first place for a hobby project. So one of the ways to monetize it is to find a niche where enterprise might be willing to pay for it and be really good at it, which is hard and not for every type of project. So yeah, there's not too many avenues for easy monetization. I know that right now with GitHub sponsorships, it makes it a little bit easier where you can just press a button and they'll sign you up for a recurring monthly payment. I do that for one library, I think. But, even personally, like $5 a month, that's, $60 a year. It's a, non-trivial sum of money every year for just one library. And how many libraries do I use? It's paradoxical because if I were to pay $5 for every library I use, it's like paying a salary of a full stack developer for a year, because it's going to be a lot. So personally, I can't necessarily afford it. I can only support the libraries that I really have a reason to. And there's been a lot of voices in the community basically saying enterprises who are using free versions of our libraries should be willing to come forward and sponsor a lot of them. You know that XKCD where it's like this building that is supported by one tiny thing, and it says like valiant efforts of some unpaid maintainer somewhere in Nebraska or something like that. And it's true. But again, companies are not going to spend money unless they are made to. So there's no easy way out of this either. Like some of them might do it out of the kindness of their hearts for publicity reasons. Apart from that, it's a really tough sell.
But how does this name position? Because what I was thinking, why um, what I was just thinking about is just I was thinking, what if NPM becomes a subscription service, and therefore, since it's the manager, everybody maybe we can subscribe $5 a month for NPM. Then you can get the libraries, but then NPM is able to support the developers. Honestly, it's just a wild thought. I don't know the business side of it very much, so I'm not too sure how it will work. It's just that I know that maintainers need to get paid, and the fact that it's open source, um, a lot of people think it's free work, really. So like
Yeah,
nobody's expecting any sort of compensation. But
it's
I
thankless.
think if we, I'm sorry.
It's thankless.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And if we want quality work, I think there should be some form of motivation
yeah.
um,
Well,
in
I
this
mean,
sense.
quality does not necessarily correlate with payment.
No,
Uh,
not really. It's
but
just some form of
yeah,
motivation.
there should be some motivation. I think one model that might work that I just thought about is, you know, I've recently convinced you to start using Telegram a little bit more. And
Yeah,
for those of you that don't know, because it's not as popular in like United States and Canada, it's a messenger similar to WhatsApp, but with like a lot of various functionalities that WhatsApp doesn't necessarily have. And so what they have been doing is they have a version of Telegram, which is absolutely free. You know, you can download it, install it on your phone, and start talking to people and join all of these communities and group chats and what have you with voice calls, video calls. You have all that. But recently they've rolled out this feature called Telegram Premium, which you pay a little bit of money for, and it just gives you a little bit of extra. So it's kind of similar to the, free license and commercial license closed source, right? And for instance, you get more, like you can attach longer videos to your posts, or they have a feature where you can do speech to text conversion. So for people who really like to record you voice conversations instead of typing them out, it gives you a little button, you press on it, and it converts speech to text so you can read it instead of having to listen to it for 5 minutes, which is pretty useful. I mean, I use that a lot. And there's other things. There's like really fancy animated stickers. There's like regular stickers, and then there's premium stickers. They just like really fancily animated. So when you place it in a conversation, like this big animation plays across the entire screen. And if you have a regular version, you can still see them. You just can't post them. So, a little bit of envy for people in the same chat. So maybe what NPM could do is, well, because they provide free service, like you don't have to pay for NPM, you get all of the benefits of NPM for free. Maybe they could say, okay, there's NPM Premium, and regular NPM download speed will be throttled. So you don't get your packages in 5 seconds, you get them in 7 seconds. And if you want to get them super fast, pay us $5 a month, and we'll distribute it to package authors. I think it creates additional logistical challenges because now they have to do like accounting for, like if I'm a paid person and I have to validate my account, like if I work for a company, maybe it needs to be like a corporate account, but those are solvable. But
yeah,
ultimately,
absolutely.
in terms of how many packages you use, and again, there's this other thing, like what do you count? Do you count downloads? Do you count installs? Do you count usage per month? Like thorny type of subjects because, anyway. So, and if I pay them a Fiverr and I download all of these packages, my Fiverr just gets distributed across all of those people. But then again, okay, like what happens? We have React on NPM. Should Facebook be getting paid for millions of downloads of React? Like, probably yes, but at the same time, it's Facebook with their $1 billion. So a lot of people would be not very happy with that, I imagine. They would be like, oh, boo, 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 boo. Why is Facebook getting paid for this? They already make so much money. I'm just saying that that's what people are going to say, like, for sure.
The agreement is agreement, the deal is the deal.
Yeah.
If it helps, React is just one out of the million libraries and NPM. So there will, and like I said, like this is not exactly my forte, so I don't really know how to plan out the financial part of it. But I just know the reason why actually I was asking about all this is just because I was wondering if like libraries like Lodash actually get some kind of financial compensation of some sort. Do you think that might have supported them in this kind of issue bankruptcy? Because this is issue bankruptcy, right? So we don't even know if it was financial for financial reasons that made them like close everything and want to start a new thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe if they had more developers and they were able to afford more resources, maybe they would be able to continue to maintain this version of Lodash, or who knows, maybe they're not even going to come back anymore. So for me, I'm just curious, like looking for a way to find a solution to avoid issues like this in the JavaScript ecosystem because
yeah. I see what you mean. I don't know, maybe Lodash is not the best example again because they're saying that internally just rewriting, so don't read too much into closing all of the issues. It's like it has its reasons. But anyway, assuming some package X did this for the reasons that they just can't afford to maintain it anymore, I guess it depends because is the number of downloads and the money from the, let's say, our supposed NPM Premium collected, will it cover the cost of a developer full time or even part time? And then we also touched on it briefly last time, is that when you pay for something, you will have different expectations of it. Like if I pay a $5 a month, should there be NPM Extra Premium where you pay $50 a month and you get some priority in bug fixing? I think that's between you and a library maintainer if you want to do that, right? It's just like all of these weird personal interplay for this that it'll make it really complicated, which again, it doesn't mean that it can't be done. And I think the only people who can do it is NPM themselves. Because if I were to open a paid NPM alternative, I would have to convince hundreds of thousands of people to publish packages to my platform and then convince millions of people to download packages from my platform and pay me money. So that's a non-starter. Like it's not going to happen. So if NPM does it, it'll be interesting,
I think so. I think it would be interesting. And I don't know if it's going to be a small thing to do.
Oh yeah.
I genuinely think it's gonna be because there is come on, it's JavaScript. It's not today years old. It's like it's been in existence for a long time, and there is a lot of people who their entire application depends on all these things. But the thing is like what we're trying to find is just it's just something to keep libraries being active.
Right.
It's just a way to avoid, to find better maintenance for the libraries.
Yeah.
Just so, because sometimes I think like sometimes like you said, you can see like a library maybe last updated 10 years ago. Why? It's not because like the person it's open source, but it's not getting traffic. And also I think if gets a paid service, NPM can hold the developers responsible for the quality that they have. Like
Which will
if
put
you
a lot of
say,
people away, I believe,
yeah,
because
but there's no.
now I mean, as a library author, if now I have to go through some vetting process to prove to
Mhm.
NPM that I'm good enough, it's going to be a massive filter. A bunch of people will filter out immediately, and it
But
will affect the ecosystem, And I was
true.
I was
But
actually going to say that we also have to look at the potential negative outcomes out of this, because you know how monetizing content on YouTube incentivized certain type of content on YouTube, right? Which maybe is not of great quality, but it's monetizable. So there could be a lot of these negative externalities that are hard to account for and predict. Like, for instance, with Telegram Premium, there's a lot of spammers who enter chats. They have premium accounts, so they're able to use these inline emoji packs next to their name, and they're like trying to spoof kind of like the verified checkbox on Twitter type deal, where they would put some emojis in there that like form some sort of badge to kind of give themselves legitimacy. Like, I notice a lot of them, and they're all using premium accounts, so they're using it for scamming and spamming effectively. And people kind of did not expect that would happen, I guess. And I'm 100% sure that a lot of negative externalities are going to come into play that we haven't even considered yet.
true. But this is just us discussing general
Yeah,
ideas
yeah.
on how to. But another thing I was thinking about just now is that if you have NPM regulating this, so for example, like everybody knows, like everything goes through NPM when it comes to like package management in JavaScript, and it's like Android. It's not because um it's Android, like you you cannot just take any application to Google Play Store. I think you still have to go through some form of vetting process. Even if it's you built the phone yourself, I don't know if even if you built the phone yourself, like you cannot just
With
um
Android, you can. With iPhone,
can you?
not really. With Android, you can sideload. You can install applications from other sources. It doesn't have to
But
be
I
from
know
Play
for
Store.
sure on iOS you can't. But it I
On
don't know if you
iOS,
can,
you
but it
can with some provisions, and I think they're trying to pass some legislation in Europe to force them to open up to other app stores because of their monopolistic position on the market. And to speak of Google, okay, Google, when it originally came out, it was like open core.
Mhm.
Anybody can build using Android operating system, but if you want to be sort of Android certified, you have to go through some certification processes, and then you can put like the Android logo on your phone or whatever. And what started happening after? Google is still doing AOSP, which is the Android open source project, which a lot of custom mod makers have been using these to build alternative firmware for phones, where you can, root your phone, wipe it, install alternative firmware on it with different functionality. It's still based on Android. But what then Android had started doing is they introduced this massive blob called Android Play Services, and they slowly started pulling functionality out of the open source version and started putting it into the closed source version. So people who are building on top of AOSP don't get access to that unless they pirated that. So you don't get Google Play, you don't get any of their services, you don't get mapping, you don't get contact lookup, you don't get all of these things because they're all been made proprietary and pulled into this closed source piece. So now Android open source still exists, but it's progressively more and more difficult to build against it because they're removing a whole bunch of crucial tooling and crucial sort of parts of the ecosystem and hiding them away under their proprietary thing, right? So I mean, Google used to say do no evil, but they've abandoned that idea a long time ago, and now I don't like most of what they're doing. It kind of turned very, very crappy. But that's besides the point. And then,
That's the
yeah. The other thing,
the
sorry,
point.
I'm just going to briefly mention this. If NPM Premium appears, how big of a temptation would it be for them? Like, how much money should NPM Premium disburse to the package maintainers, and how much it should keep for itself? And what is the, how much of a itchy finger they're going to have to start adjusting that slider towards themselves more and more. Like all the monetization platforms, like Steam takes 30% of your revenue, EA takes 30% of your revenue, Apple takes 30% of the revenue. It's sometimes like, you know what, we're not fine with 30. We want 40, or we want 50, or we want, I don't know, 99. Like it's gonna be there.
They can measure this based on the number of downloads, right?
No, but that's not
Like,
what I'm saying. I'm saying that some creative executive will be like, we're making X money and I want to make twice that. So let's just tweak the slider in terms of revenue distribution and just start taking more money for ourselves without any recourse. And everybody who's dependent on the system for livelihood is now screwed. Like, that's going to happen. Same as with all of these companies that we discussed in the beginning, right?
I don't know if it will happen, but even if it does, at least like there should be some form of planning towards this. This type of project is like I said earlier, it's like this type of project is not something that you do overnight, or maybe I hope NPM is listening to us. I hope that they're just gonna use the idea blindly. I hope you will do some form of planning and um, risk
Yeah,
management,
yeah.
because I know there will be some things that will come up. But for me, the only idea I'm looking for is just like I would like to have some form of incentive. Say, for example, if I build, like, it's like we talked about, I mentioned like in our last conversation, if I build a library now and I have it on NPM and I built it for myself to do a certain thing, but because I want to use it in my project, NPM, okay, now, um, I don't have any reason to go back there, really, but it's there on NPM, right? And I don't need to maintain it because I don't get anything from doing that.
Yeah.
But if I know that if it's there without being maintained for like let's say 1 year, if it's there without being updated for let's say 1 year, NPM will remove it. I know that I need to go back there and update it.
Well,
Just
it's the
just
thing is like you can still not go and not update it and screw over a bunch of people. So some people would choose not to care. And
but
should NPM have the right to have other project as a hostage to their maintainer? The whole idea is like if you downloaded some old version, you can keep using that old version in perpetuity. So even if somebody gets bored or gets hit by a bus, the outcome still is going to be the same, that you can still use it, right?
I'm not I wasn't saying that you won't be able to use the library. I'm just saying like there should be some form of um, movement around just to know like there's still people who are still maintaining this library.
Yeah. Yeah. See,
And
I think, yeah.
also
Okay.
and
Yeah.
also it helps to maintain the quality of libraries that will be uploaded because and also even for security reasons, like if they get to do some form of vetting and get to do some form of like maintaining the quality of like anyway, we're
Yeah.
speaking generally right now,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I don't we'll see what the plan is later in the future.
I
Just
just want to play the devil's advocates for these things because we've already seen it. Okay, so first of all, vetting will almost immediately have to be turned to automatic means, same as submission in like Google Store, Play Store. Most of it goes through automatic means, and if it gets flagged, you might be so lucky to get a person approving it, and it turns into this big black box where you submit and you pray. You never know if it's going to get approved or not. So that puts a lot of stress on maintainers. And I remember reading articles from people saying, "Hey, I've been an iOS developer since App Store first came around, and now the amount of hoops I have to jump through to publish on that platform are so ridiculous, it's not worth it for me anymore, so I quit." It basically has the exactly opposite effect of what you're trying to achieve, right? And then um, maybe there's a way where you can have a path to succession. Like if you decide to step down, there is some kind of protocol that allows for people to take over. Like for instance, there's a library that's published on NPM and there's a bug in it that I have submitted a PR for, and it's been sitting in the PR queue for 2 years, and the guy just never replied. So I don't know, maybe he did get hit by a bus for all I know. And that's it. But the thing is, the name of the library is occupied. I can release it under some other name, which is technically possible, but that's kind of like, it creates confusion. And
Now there is
yeah,
multiple
yeah,
libraries
yeah,
doing the same thing.
yeah. So there needs to be like clear path to succession. But when that happens, how do you ensure that it's not going to get hijacked by some scammers? Because again, these things also happen where some application, some iOS or Android application that is really popular gets bought out by some unscrupulous people, and then the next version come up full of like advertisements or crypto miners or what have you, and nobody knows that they changed hands, right? So there's just so many of these weird tangential gotchas that people probably look at it all and be like, you know what, I just don't want to bother. If you want to put the library on NPM, do it. If eventually you get tired of it or you don't get paid enough money and stop doing it, whatever. Like, it's too complicated. There's going to be too many people who will not be happy with either way you're going to do it. And it's just not worth getting into overall, it feels like sometimes.
I can see how that can happen. I can see how we can get to this stage, really. Like maybe some people might start to like avoid it, especially when you start, especially if money gets involved, like when you realize that you have to pay a certain
Yeah.
amount of money to use
I guess with the
package
premium
manager.
model, you don't have to. You still get it. You just get it at a degraded rate or quality or something. So you still get it in the end. You just have to wait a little bit longer, maybe. So
Yeah, exactly. You see, there are different ways to look at it, but I can see how some people would start to look for like other means because
and they're free to do
it's
so.
like yeah, and they're free to do so. It's like Telegram, like you said. Like there is Telegram,
WhatsApp.
the premium
Yeah.
Telegram, and then there is the free Telegram, and then there is WhatsApp. So if you don't feel like you want to pay for the premium Telegram, but you still want to have some of these features, maybe you can find it on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Like, for example, text to speech. I think there is already that on WhatsApp, if I'm
Maybe.
not wrong, but
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, so I think when the money gets involved, there will definitely be some form of um competition or some form of like challenge
Yeah.
to the uh autonomy. I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
good word to use there. To the power that NPM holds in terms of like
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
library management. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still think that there should be some form of regulations in terms of like these libraries, because then again, like you can have like lesser um security issues if there is some form of like vetting for like all this like
Yeah. I,
libraries
I
that get
think
into
I
this.
think they do security, more strict security for very popular libraries. I think they require like pretty much all top 100 libraries, all of their maintainers are required to have like two-factor on their account for publishing, and like there's these recently they've ramped up their security efforts quite a bit after a couple of incidents. But
Yeah,
supply chain attacks are common, and sort of to close it off, like money does change everything. It attracts a whole other class of actors that are normally not going to be around because they smell profits. Like even
yeah.
even like in video games, you have like in-game currency that you're not supposed to trade for real money. And what's the first thing that happens? Immediately there's a marketplace trying to trade in-game currency for real money. I think the only company that does it successfully to some degree is in EVE Online. You can buy what effectively is in-game currency for real money, because the item you use to extend your subscription, maybe now it's different. I haven't played EVE Online in years, but back in the day, you need to spend this resource in game to extend your subscription, and you can either create it through in-game means or you can buy it for real money. So most people who don't have enough time, they would just buy it and treat it as a subscription. But people who are very invested in the game could generate enough in-game currency to pay for their subscription from within the game itself. But in terms of trading of that item for real money, like there's all these marketplaces and they're trying to ban them. Same thing happens for like skins for CSGO where people would try to sell them for real money. And as soon as money is involved, NFTs, yeah, as soon as money is involved, you open up this Pandora's box of all sorts of weird behaviors and weird incentives. And so it's a really, really complicated question. And I don't know if we'll
Yeah,
ever figure it out.
yeah. I hope we do. Because if we don't, what do you think will be like the future of library management in JavaScript specifically?
I don't
You
think
know
it's
how
specific to
complicated JavaScript
JavaScript.
is?
I don't think it's
No,
specific
no,
to JavaScript.
but I would want us to focus, like,
Okay, sure.
just to use JavaScript as a focus,
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
can talk
yeah,
about different other like
yeah, yeah.
managers, but JavaScript, what do you think will be um, the future of JavaScript
I think
library
that currently
management? I'll just say that.
there is no lack of idealistic, bright-eyed young people who are willing to write code and put it on NPM. And hopefully it will never cease. So there's always going to be some library to take care of you. It might not be this library, but it'll be some other library. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
But why do you think so? Okay, you know what? I think you're right, but that's because I feel like in our industry, yeah, most of us or many people get paid based on like I did that. That's the payment.
Yeah.
Just the point to like I did that. But you're not really getting like the value from what you did.
Well, that's just like your opinion, man. But what I'm saying is that
This is I don't know.
you may be motivated by monetary reward. Other people may have more altruistic motivations. Everybody's different, and there will be people who are altruistic and they're willing to put it out there for the fact that they're putting it out there without getting a single red cent in return, and that's fine, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's good.
are they getting used by other people? Yes. Are they getting abused by other people? Unless they're coming into their PRs and start crapping all over the place, probably not. I mean, you kind of know
Probably
what you're
yes.
signing up for. No, I
Probably
mean,
yes.
well, probably yes, but those people are they deserve a special place in hell for their behavior and any.
Exactly my point. You see, probably yes, which is exactly the reason why we're talking about this.
Yeah,
Because if you have a library where you just did and you not really thinking to
yeah.
go back there, and then someone is there
Yeah.
creating like an issue
Yeah.
on the PR to say like, oh, I had this, and then you say a
Well,
lot of things
you know,
and then you're like,
success is measured by the amount of people that hate what you're doing. Like the more people hate what you're doing, the more successful you are. And if you don't want to
I'm so
be abused by people, do not enter the public arena. Unfortunately, if you do, you will get repercussions. Even this podcast, okay, it has 33 subscribers, and so far I haven't received shit from anyone. If maybe 3 years down the line it reaches 50,000 subscribers, I am bound to get a bunch of hate through my inbox. But if I find it too much to deal with, I can always just close my computer and touch grass.
No, you won't do that. I mean, I hope it never gets to that because, of course, like you said,
You hope it never
hate
gets
is.
50,000 subscribers?
I hope you never have to close. No, of course, we're gonna get more than
No, I'm
1,000
kidding. I'm
subscribers.
kidding.
But it's like you said, like hate is the measure of success. So if you get a lot of hate, it means you do it right, no?
Yeah, you probably like, you know, if you don't have any enemies, it means you're not doing anything, right?
Yeah.
Been
So
like that since the beginning, since the dawn of man, I would imagine. What a positive note to wrap up the podcast at. Isn't it just cheery?
exactly, it is. I mean, it's not cool to deal with. hate is not cool to deal
Yeah,
with,
no,
but
for sure.
it's not too cool to deal with,
I think there should
but
be
it's
like
part of life.
some sort of you know package maintainers anonymous where you get emotional support for your thankless existence.
Maybe would you do that? You should create that. You should look into it.
If you're a package maintainer and you're struggling in life, leave a comment. We'll have a chat. I'll listen to what pains you. I'm not kidding,
Oh,
by the
for
way.
real?
Yeah,
Nah,
for
for
sure.
real. Actually, for real.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that I'm actually yeah, for real. Yeah. You know what? I was laughing, but yeah, true. That would be actually a
But you
good
just
thing
got
to
to
do.
figure out a way not to burn out yourself. Like imagine like psychologists listening to people's problems. Like if you don't have a way to abstract yourself and not empathize, so you'd actually like play those scenarios in your head against your own life. Like if you do that, you'll probably burn out even quicker. So you kind of have to have this degree of uh, separation. Which, if you listen to some psychologists talk about how they like deal with that stuff, it's pretty interesting in itself. Psychological help to other people is tough. It's a skill set.
Yeah, yeah. It is indeed. Otherwise, we'll all be therapists, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, it is indeed. So
I keep bringing this analogy of going to confession every couple of episodes, but I feel like it's what it is, right? You know,
yeah,
the unburdening of the soul.
basically the
Yeah.
social connection.
Yes, yes.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, Vasili, thank you for your time today, and thank you for joining this conversation with me, having this conversation with me about issue bankruptcy. It's pretty like for me, I think I've not really paid attention to this side of the industry a lot until when I saw that and I shared with you. So I would say it's a lot of learning for me. So, but
Yeah,
hopefully we'll
yeah,
find a solution to these things.
yeah.
And
Hopefully we will. And yeah, I'd like
mm,
to thank you, Mo, for being here and taking the time, bringing this topic. It was an interesting conversation. It was kind of an echo of a conversation I had before, but it definitely needs to be discussed because it feels like it is a problem. I think just because we have access to so many things, it masks the nature of the problem. Like, hey, there's all of this abundance. What are you talking about? But for the people in the front lines, I'm pretty sure they feel it very acutely, and not much is being said or done about it, except when, some bubble bursts and some drama appears on the surface where people say, oh no, how terrible. And then a week later, everybody forgets and keeps doing what they're doing. So I don't know if I'm guilty of that myself, and if tomorrow I'll just go NPM install and not think about it twice. I have my own life and my own problems to deal with, to be
for sure,
honest.
for sure, for
So,
sure.
but hey, I do pay a $5 for that one library that I don't even use right now. So I'm morally exempt. Just kidding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Now I feel guilty.
Support
Okay,
support your favorite maintainer.
for sure.
It'll make their day.
Probably it will actually. I think it will. And now that we are creating a safe space for maintainers, so yeah, we should look out for them.
Yeah. You know what they say about the road to hell being paved with good intentions, right?
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll
Well,
see.
thank you everybody for spending your time with us. I hope you learned something and you enjoyed this conversation. Uh, Leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, join the Telegram, join the Discord. So you don't have to have a little checklist for all the different things that you should join. But if you do at least one of those things, I'd be pretty happy. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.